Well, hello everyone. Here, talk about research right here. And what does it usually mean when we do any source of research, though? And that's basically another way of how you want to say is to word that yeah, you're just looking up some information about something, or just figuring out, or just doing the basic studies right here. And it's just another way of how you want to kind of put together the pieces of the puzzle and also trying to solve something. And a lot of times, I guess, trying to solve a mystery or anything like that, trying to just find out, any information about something. And so, if we're going to be doing these sorts of studying, though, a lot of times it sure seems that way that, it all kind of starts by finding out about a topic, about, to where that anything that's still waiting to be solved, or anything about what you found out about any source of problem solving or anything like that. But really, what does it usually mean when we do any source of research? And like anybody probably thinking too, is to where if you just like working independently, you just like working at your own time, studying at your own time, and you are pretty much are looking at that information, that database, and you're just kind of getting some ideas about what you want to use. And of course, you're just trying out different topics and all, but you're still that. But talk about right here, but this right here is you talk about for Made in America right here. But let's just say that if people might even say too, if you're going to start your morning by saying this to word that, yeah, well, you woke up one morning and find out that you had an idea just by writing down a few notes and maybe a few ideas to generate from. And then after you listen to the president's speech or anything like that, and then anything that kind of gets you an idea about what you want to talk about, any source of presentation like that. But really, though, what I really want to talk about right here is talking about whenever we do any source of research, though, that's just another way of how we want to get the information about something. And let's just say that, just to study a little bit more about, something, and find out, more information about something. But really, why do we think, though, is to we're talking about for research, though? Why do we think that we would want to do any source of research based on, the president's speech, the State of the Union address or anything like that, anything about the Democrats and Republican parties or anything like that. And a lot of times it's like, well, just to kind of follow up about what they're talking about and all that, but still when we do research, though, do we necessarily think about is that the same solutions, any sorts of results and solutions and data, to where that does that kind of give somebody an opportunity to speak up about something, or anything that they're going to find out, and especially anything that comes to their mind, especially. But one thing that I was thinking about whenever I was listening to the president's speech, of course, was talk about you know Madam Speaker and Madam Vice President. And so it's like, yeah, President Biden, was saying, like, yeah, talking to about Speaker Pelosi right there, and then the Vice President right there. Like, yeah, nobody has said those words at this podium, and it's about time. But still, that talk about right here, you got here's the president's speech, right? But still, that I know with me, though, that whenever it comes to understanding about that, any source of research, though, that whenever we think about research, that's another way of how you study more about how something works, and then what exactly that something is doing, the object, or if we're talking about anything that is related to any source of data, or anything that you're going to be reading more about. And so a lot of times it's like, well, really, shouldn't the study would also be about the jobs and climate change, and as well as other things that besides COVID, the COVID-19 and all that a lot of things that the president talked about. But still, that at the time you want to know too that whenever you do research about a lot of things, that's basically, taking your time away from maybe a few other requirements. And at the time, you want to know too that about the president, though, that a lot of times if you're going to be studying something, that there's going to be requirements. But let's just say that whenever you research something, does that always mean to where that you gotta go by the requirements, or that there's like what you call certain agendas, or that that person's going to tell you, the teacher's going to maybe tell you that the instructor or the professor is going to tell you that no, that you can let your mind wander, and you can go ahead and just say something like, yeah, for what you want to research about and study about. And so let's just say if one of those, like talk about jobs, or another way of saying, for what makes, and working American useful whenever it comes to jobs, whenever it comes to employment. And so let's just say if I were to put on here is to where that, for employment, that those who find my work interesting. Those who find my work interesting. And a lot of times it's like, those who find my work interesting, you talk about for research, though, you're basically are studying about, how something new, how it's developed and how does it work, and, et cetera, et cetera. But the way I think about it too, though, that like the president would probably say that, 40 hours a week or so, but still, that at the time, like everybody else might even say too, that do you think that you'll be able to handle 40 hours a week? Or if anything, if you're going to be working any sorts of job, really, that you probably want to know too that if you're going to be working up to 40 hours a week, and then for sure that how do you know if the job is really getting done or not? And a lot of times it's like, well, a lot of people would probably like to know about that, about if the job's getting done, or if anything is just something that kind of came to your mind and something that's still being discussed or whichever. But still, that I know with me that there's a certain way, like accomplishments. Talk about for accomplishments, and so different source of sayings that we can also add to that about is to what are like the hashtags or any source of category about whenever it comes to that we are close to getting the job done, or we're about a couple of weeks. I'm like, so far as the agenda goes, it's like it's supposed to be like a goal, though. And so when we think about that, though, talking about research, though, that like everybody else will probably say too, if you're going to be at the library, and most of the time, like at the library, or just doing surfing, searching the internet, or looking through, the dictionaries or any, you're like, you're basically are finding things. Whenever you do research, you're basically are finding things, right? But what does that usually mean whenever you figure out, whenever you learn things at your own time, like independently? And like anybody say that, what do you think that the president would say about that? Is to where that if you figure it out how something worked, independently, and want to know just a little bit too, to where, okay, you were able to figure that out on your own and all that, but still. But talk about right here, I just mainly want to mention right here, talk about from Madam Speaker and then that Madam Vice President right here. And like I say, the president that talked about a lot of things during his speech and all that, but still that it's like, that talk about education and all, but still, I also want to mention too is that whenever it comes to understanding just a little bit more about the employment, and then also about for how things are going so far as made in America, and a lot of times it sure seems that way. That I don't know if you want to call it maybe a homemade or anything like that, spaghetti or anything like that, but let's just say that for watching the president's speech, though, is that do you think that maybe that you would probably tell everybody that think of one thing that you should be proud of, like that you were able to learn in your own time and knowing about for how do you think that you would want to explain to somebody about something such as something that you learned at your own time, and any sorts of goals or achievements or about research. And so let's just say that there was something that you were able to figure out at your own time, and let's just say if it's a few mathematical, about easy facts to remember or anything like that. And you want to know too is that whenever you do research about something, what you are basically are doing is that you are pretty much get you're thinking you're thinking thinking straight about things, and then also you're just trying to figure out things. You're studying things a little bit more. But let's just say that if one of those things is maybe going to be a buzz as to where if you want to start out the sentence by saying is toward it, yeah, well, here, this is what I'm going to do, okay? You're finding that the key elements to better understand what our country can do to yeah preventing for preventing for the worst being prepared for the worst. So let's just say that whenever it comes to understanding about job creation, and whenever it comes to understanding about for where our country between now and the next 5 years or so, but still that but really though, that whenever you study about something, are you really are you pretty much trying to get a better understanding about what's going on now to be able to improve for the better, right? So, like everybody else will probably say too, that what is it usually? I'm like, yeah, I'll go ahead and put on here. See here, put a space right here, and put right here. Talk about for the requirements. How can we really explain about the requirements? And everybody else will probably want to know too that almost everything we do nowadays that there's going to be a requirement, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way, that we use it like it's like another rule to where that okay, yeah, well, if there's going to be a requirement, and then at the time you want to know too that you're not really allowing your mind thinking and allow that person to be able to provide any source of opinions or feedback about something. It seems like that you're pretty much are saying is toward that we're going to learn this skill the way that the state requires you to learn it, or the way that the program requires you to learn it, such and such. And so at the time you want to know too that you can't really be flexible with everybody else whenever you set these requirements or whichever. So I guess a lot of times, if you want to kind of call it brainstorm, but still. But when we're talking about research, though, that's another way of how you want to introduce the work that to maybe to a client. You want to introduce what you do to somebody, and a lot of times it sure seems that way. That yeah, well, this is what I found out. That what I found out was, the information, the data, and all that. That's collected and transmitted from a system, from file to file, and for sure that the way that we're talking about the way it's generated, also that whenever we research something that we're looking up, and we're just trying to study about how that information is collected and how it works and all that. And so when we think about that, though, like I talk about, if we're going to be looking at a document right here, and you want to know too, is that really whose job really is it to modify the files, and then also who's in charge is checking for any corrections, and maybe providing any extra copies, or maybe creating any Excel files or anything like that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever we talk about research, though, that's just another way of how we study just a little bit more about what's going on now, and then for what could be approved later on, and anything that maybe somebody had found out, and at the time you want to know too that really that yeah, that it's like if you want a cause is toward that you're pretty much are discovering a new skill that maybe not all companies are aware of, or something that they didn't quite understand during the time, whichever it is. But talk about right here, talk about for the president's speech right here. So you have right here, I don't know if everybody here is able to see this right here, but they're talking about, for vice president with Joe Biden right here, for Madam Speaker right there. But while watching the president right there, and a lot of things are kind of going through my mind whenever I was watching the speech, and like, you people likely want to know too that whenever you do watch a speech and he starts talking about, a lot of things, about about jobs and in education, and also that other things that that they're going to be due for improvement within the next 8 months or so. And so it's like, but one of them was talk about the for the COVID and all, but still that I know with me though that one thing that I just want to mention to everybody, I'm like, do you even know were they was one of them, was Madam Speaker even wearing a blue skirt? And I think that it might have been tan, I'm not sure, but still, go ahead and paint those in. And at the time, 102 with a lot of these paintings right here, you want to make you want to paint them as like if they were speaking at the podium right there. People probably thinking too that well, Madam Vice President and President right there, along with Madam Speaker Pelosi right there. Everybody else might even say too that well, you have that to where that whenever it comes to listening to the president though, and I want to know just a little bit too. Whenever you're going to be listening to the president talk and everything, and I want to know is like, he talks about jobs and everything, but still that whenever it comes to job creation, but still that but one thing that I'm just trying to get to where is that by every time we listen to the president talking and all that, and you wonder just a little bit too to where that what exactly is it that maybe that the president is asking you to do necessarily. And one of those could also be is to where that well, if you want to go ahead and just write a paper about what you thought that the president was thinking about, like, you want to go and just write down in that paper right there about what you thought about the president's speech, or, anything that goes on in the country and all. But still, I just really think too that whenever we think about climate change and everything, that really though that the first question that's really going to come to my mind, of course, is that really, are people really going to listen to you whenever it comes to better understanding about where our technology is going, and then what the agreements are about, talk about the executive orders, and also about the agreements and everything that come in place. So a lot of times it sure seems that way to where that, well, whenever you get older, it sure seems that way that, can we really take a vote on what goes on with what the rules are about, what the executive orders are, what the state requirements are, and what the federal requires and all that stuff, and about what agreements of the program requires and all that. But let's just say that if one of my researches would also be a buzz, as to where, like everybody else would probably say too, that you just want to kind of brainstorm ideas and just kind of put together a document about, well, if you want to place a bet, like you go ahead and write an article about what do you think that's going to be going on in this economy, maybe, probably by summertime, maybe by August or September or something like that. If you want to tell people that what do you think that's going to be going on in the country, between now and then, and the things that that you would maybe like to see happen going on in the country and all that. And so it sure seems that way that well, really, that anything that the president's going to be talking about, but still that the stuff that hasn't happened yet, and like I mentioned before, is that whenever you do, whenever we're talking about the president, or if we're talking about any politics, though, that you want to know too that the things that you find out from maybe about like anybody say too that whenever you get into these conversations, a lot of times it sure seems that way. That most of the time that a lot of these companies are asking for your feedback or any comments that you would like to add. And a lot of times it's like, well, really, that I don't know if you really want to hear my opinion about that, or if anything that anything that I found out. Well, really, that one thing that I did find out, especially though, is that knowing about that whenever you hear the president talk about stuff and all that, and half the time you want to know too, is that number one, that we all know that applying for a job is not just about an application, and we probably know that too. It's also an interview, and it's also just an eligibility to determine if you were qualified for that job, and then of course that if you were picked, for that position or not. So it's like, well, when we talk about jobs, though, that it seems like to me that there's something else besides jobs. That, like anybody say that the president can probably also say too that yeah, well, what does it usually mean when you put in a lot of the hard work and effort in for something that you've been desperately working hard for? And if we're talking about good confidence and self-esteem and all that stuff, and maybe if it's also about good courage about something, but really though, that can we really ask ourselves that question to where that how do you know if you are qualified to fill that position, and why is it that the company really wants you for that job? And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that do we kind of call that the American question, so far as is that companies would actually like for you to show them what you do there. I'm like, yeah, what exactly do you do at your computer? What do you do on your smartphone most of the time, to where that's why that maybe most companies, most job assessments, and like people may say that why do you think that maybe for any reason at all that there is going to be a manager that's going to want to sit down with you and talk to you about what is it that you do? And a lot of times it sure seems that way. That do you think that's more likely that that's the case? That they're going to say that hey, we would like to look at your research. We would like to see a little bit about what you're doing. What like some and some of that stuff is personal stuff too. But still, we would like to know what is it that you're doing during your spare time. And so it's like, yeah, well, the things that you're doing in your spare time, that do you think that maybe that could improve your chances of being hired at your future job at some point? And let's just say that if you have a talent that maybe that companies have not yet discovered yet. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. When we think about research, though, are we necessarily thinking about a treasure type item, to where something that that the company was not aware of, and then maybe something that you were able to figure out? And so that's why it sure seems that way. That tell the president that there are a lot of things that you've been trying to figure out, and a lot of things that come to my mind. Actually, everybody, as soon as I figure out something, it's like, sometimes I try to think about something before I actually do it. So far as that, yeah, before I post that on my profile, or before I share it, even on social media, a lot of times I always have to think about that, to where that the things that I find out and the things that I'm able to figure out, and want to know too is that yeah, well, not everybody's going to understand that. So I guess how are you going to be able to explain to this company about what is it that you do and all? But still, but one thing I want to get to is that back whenever I was a young school kid, though, it's like anything that I thought about, get home from school, and anything that I want to write down, jot down a few notes and all that. And a lot of times it was like, do you think Do you think that that really helps improve your thinking? You allow your brain power and your thinking whenever you do that. Whenever you do take down notes and whenever you do jot down a few articles and like whenever you do write down notes and just take down a few scripts and all that and you just be able to understand about just be for but still like everybody else will probably say too that do you think and maybe agree upon the experts to where that something you can maybe something just to prevent any source of mechanical failure or anything like that. Do you think that maybe it's better to go ahead and explain on like any source of documentation about in case for to just to prevent a failure or just to study and think about something about as to where do you think it's better to explain something before like anybody else will probably say too. Whenever you do research about something, you're trying to get a study about what's going on with the process and what can improve, right? But let's just say that if you were to write down a few notes and just say as to where, okay, well, if you try this and then that could, what's the worst that could happen, and then there could be what you call like semicolons and quotations. I'm like, yeah, I'll show everybody here what I'm talking about, but still, but if we're going to be writing down something, and let's just say that I'll go and start right here, that if there's any source of a failure, if there's any source of mechanical failure, though, a technical failure, though, and everybody else will probably say too that technical failure, and you'll likely want to know too that you want to go ahead and include on here like see a semicolon or something like that. That research. The research. Found file type. And more likely, this would probably maybe be in red markings right here. But still, if you were to put on here, the research found file type missing right here. Missing, and along with if you want to put on here quotes like that, and then if you want to go ahead and maybe I'll also put on here that it's like semicolons or equals or something like that. So if you type in anything like that right there, and at the time I'm like and then like anybody else will probably say too that if you were to do studies about that. And 102, if you see any sorts of signs and symbols like that right there, that's basically another way of how you want to get a program, a program such JavaScript, or if it's Adobe or any programs like that. You're trying to get those programs to communicate between each other. So if we're talking about data science, if we're talking about any source of research, so far as is that if you want to kind of call that maybe just a little bit like an experiment, to where the experiment basically means is that you try it just to see what happens, to try it to see if it works, and if it doesn't work, so at the time you want to know too that if it's really good to go ahead and experiment around with things compared to just a study about, okay, well really that there are more likely is going to be maybe some some issues going on with any mistakes that are made or whatever you call it, and that can maybe cause a serious problem, right? So that's why it sure seems that way. In order to be able to fix the problem more professionally, that a lot of experts might even say too, you really just gotta know your tools and know the equipment and know your programs and everything, and know the system very well, just to be able to prevent any source of any major issue that comes up at later on point. But let's just say though that if we're talking about one of our research projects would be about is toward something to better explain what is it that in case if something goes wrong, or maybe any data that's released, and like I say anything like, like a diagnostics report or anything like that. But still, jQuery and, anything like that. But I just really think, too, that, just to better understand, do research about something, and, say that that's another way of how you want to observe about, just to prevent a technical failure from happening in the future, that you spend more time researching about how the equipment works and how something works, and what do you think that can be done to be able to improve for the better. So at the time, everybody else might even say too that a lot of engineers and maybe technicians and mechanical workers might even say too that you really don't want to spend the extra time just to figure out all that other stuff, because that really that not very many technical failures are maybe going to take place any time point or whichever, or if anything that the equipment the studies and then the equipment and everything just works totally different than compared to from what it was a few weeks ago, whichever it is. But the way I think about it too, though, that how important is it to really recognize what to recognize the skills, and so that's why it sure seems that way. To where when we think about jobs, though, do we necessarily think about the paychecks? Do we necessarily think about to where, okay, getting to know our clients very well, getting to know our infrastructure very well, getting to know the skills very well, getting to know our clients and our coworkers very well. If anything, people may even say too that, well, really, maybe getting to know infants trade or something like that very well. Getting to know something very well. So how are we going to be able to accomplish a lot of that within the next two more years or so upon this climate, like when it comes to climate change and all that? And so really that one way we can think about this, though, is that talk about for research, though. There's probably a lot of people out there might even say that a lot of their good education came from a lot of their studying hours. So they spent a lot of time. They spent several hours, like every night, between 9 and 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, studying about, just to understand a little bit more about how that, how the machines work and how the data works, and of course a lot of how all the other, all the information that's collected and all that, about how things work. And so it sure seems that way. If we were to do the math, if you multiply 5 hours a day times 300 days or so out of a year or so, that could that possibly improve the critical mind thinking by at least 10%? So if you recognize something, and let's just say that people might even say too that that the typical study about how something works, though, that do you think that maybe that you can gain more knowledge by at least 10% if you at least take at least by every other weekend or so, that at least study for at least 5 hours, and just to be able to better understand how something works? And people may say that, well, some of the results may come back as to where that, if there's anything new that you found out, or maybe if there's anything about the same that you found out, but still, that, but a lot of times, though, it sure seems that way, that, whenever I watch the president speak, a lot of times, it's like, well, you just never know about, is the president really asking all of us to do our part in, like, what you call is like, well, go out and fill out a job application. Well, I'm asking you, asking you for a favor, okay? Go knock on your neighbor's door, okay? Go get your neighbor's attention. Go ahead and call a friend of yours, or call your client, or call your cousin. Call your cousin and tell him that, hey, I need you to help out. Get everybody on insurance. Get everybody. Help somebody get on. Help them sign up. To get insurance. Help them to sign up so they can get qualified. So a lot of times it sure seems that way the president is maybe going to be asking all of us, to knock on people's doors and telling them, hey, yeah, if you don't have insurance or, yeah, sign up today, to get information about this or that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that a lot of what I see what the president is kind of doing right now is more likely, yeah, blogging and also, posting updates and advertisements. And so it's like, yeah, that, you know, uh, we all know that, we see the president, almost everywhere, but, half the time you want to know too that how come if you were to see him maybe on the local comic book in 102 that what do you think that his cartoon character would look like? And people say that yeah, well the cartoon character for President Biden, what do you think they would look like? Speaker Pelosi right there. I like, well, really, would it look like more likely like a captain right there? Captain Biden, or but still. I could probably say too that whenever I think about this too, that whenever we think about history, though, whenever we think about the president of the United States, that do we necessarily think about the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner? But I just really think too that whenever you think about whenever you watch the president speak, though, a lot of times it sure seems that way. That is he really talking to the American people? Is he really telling everybody that I need you all to do your part by yeah, understanding, but a lot of times it's like, well, Mr. President, Mr. President, a lot of this virtual stuff, of course, that also requires you to sign the paper. Maybe not everybody really understands, how that works and all that, or yeah, some things that maybe I don't quite understand about, but still, people may say that yeah, well, you can go to those places where they'll be able to fill out the application for you. You just gotta make sure you go to the right place and you're able to connect to the right people to be able to assist you and all that. But I just really think too that whenever it comes to jobs, though, we all know that jobs, that jobs is not just this four-letter word. In case if we didn't know that, talk about jobs right here. People might even say too that yeah, well, if that could maybe be abbreviation for something, and to join the join the benefits service or something like that. So yeah, that a lot of times it sure seems that way. That yeah, well, whenever it comes to jobs, though, that the jobs can be explained in many ways, right? Well, really with one of those ways is one of those ways really going to include is to where that yeah that something that people find that really relevant that a lot about. And at the time U102 is to where that yeah, if you were to actually show somebody how you do something, chances are that they're going to want to hire you. Well, what do you think about? What do you think that you would want to think about that, Mr. President? And you want to know too that yeah, when we think about jobs, though, that are we necessarily thinking about to where that yeah, people find something that they will like for you to show them, especially, or maybe something that you're good at, or something like that. So a lot of times anybody say that yeah, well, can really can jobs also be can that also include like any sorts of presentation? So let's just say that yeah, well, if you do wind up connecting with your cousin, let's just say that would you mind showing me a little bit about about what you came up with, or okay, well, can you share with me about that? So yeah, so does a job include any sorts of sharing method? And I guess everybody else might even say too that sharing, though. Yeah, sharing. So whenever you share something with somebody, at the time U102 is to where does that also include any sorts of jobs. And like anybody say too, that well, really, whenever it comes to sharing, though, whenever you share something, you're basically are allowing somebody else to look at it, right? You're not just keeping that private or whichever. I'm like, yeah, whenever you share something, you are basically are providing those same resources that you learned at your own time, and you're providing that to somebody else just to be able to help them better understand what is it that you're referring to, what is it that you're talking about, and so that's why it sure seems that way, that any documents that you're working on and all that. So like anybody else would probably say too, share, and like anybody say that, yeah, well, share. Share basically means that you are providing information from your stuff, from your closet, the closet, from your own personal time, the work from your side. You are providing that same research, that same solution. You're providing that same information, and you're willing to provide that, to somebody else, so that way you can help them better understand what is it that you're working on. So a lot of times, when we think about jobs, though, that a lot of times people may say that, can that really also include sharing? Are you required to share anything, really? Like, well, really, they say that, oh, yeah, yes and no, but still, that if you're going to be going to a job interview, and let's just say if they're going to be looking at your resume, if you're going to maybe have maybe a client or maybe a job recruiter that's going to be looking at your work, and then they're going to maybe want to know too, is to where that if they're going to be asking you about how relevant are you about sharing yourself, so far as is that whenever you do share something, you're basically allowing somebody else to look at what you're doing. And so it's like, yeah, another way of how you want to call it is to word it, yeah, just a quick overview, and also monitoring period. So like anybody else will probably say too, that anything that you're going to be working on, especially, and so that's why it sure seems that way, to where that whenever you do apply for a job, that it's like, well, really, that yeah, you really gotta get in this habit to where whenever you share, that basically means is that you're allowing other people to use your stuff. You're allowing other people, you're letting this company look at your stuff, even though that well, really, that whenever you apply for a job, that you actually were looking at a certain position, right? But still, at the same time, it sure seems that way, that yeah, there's more about you that maybe that we would like to read more about, and one of those is going to be about us as to where, well, really, are you familiar with this topic, or if you're familiar with this, or if you're familiar with that? So whenever you first walk into the door to that employer, that the first thing that you're going to be telling them about is that, yeah, are you pretty confident with learning new things and all that? And then, you're going to maybe ask a lot of questions, and like, yeah, people might even tell you too about, how good are you with about attendance or anything like that? Being on time for work, and as well as working with clients, and maybe with fulfilling the job, the agendas and everything. But still, if one of those agendas is also going to be about as to where the, yeah, do you mind sharing some, I'm like, yeah, supplies or anything that you may bring there in the office. Like anybody say that, yeah, well, donuts or pretzels or anything like that, snacks, in case of anybody that may want to know too. If you're going to be bringing any snacks or treats into the office and want to know too, that, yeah, well, really though, that if you're going to be bringing any snacks or gifts or anything like that into the office or anything like that, you go to work, and then if you bring any snacks or anything like that, people may say too, is that, really, that, if you're going to set any boundaries so far as that, yeah, well, those treats and snacks are for staff only, but really that, in case if anybody asks, ask you nicely, well, can I please have some of those? I'm like, so yeah. But anyway, So anybody can probably go on a story about that, to where that whenever you do bring anything to work, and let's just say if it's a few treats or maybe a pretzel or anything like that, or maybe a coffee or anything like that, and so you want to know too that whenever you do go to a job interview, whenever we speak about jobs though, and people are going to maybe say is to where, yeah, I would like to look at your research. And what does that mean whenever people say that I would like to look at your research? I would like to look at what is it that you do at your own personal time, at your spare time, what is it that you put together? And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that yeah, if this recruiter, I'm like, yeah, anybody that you're going to be talking to, or they're going to be flexible, just to kind of get a better understanding about what is it that you do. So we all know that whenever you do apply for a job, that there's a lot more to this job other than meeting the requirements, though. But still, that just to better understand what is it that you do, that better suits them. And like everybody else will probably say too, that whenever it comes to jobs, though, that another way of how do you want to look at it is toward the, yeah, duties and responsibilities. And like everybody else will probably say too, that talking about for Madam Vice President, I'm like, how do we tell our kids the simple facts about being responsible for stuff, a big responsibility. And we can look at that as to where that a task, right? But then also that something like an objective, that objective is going to be something that, really, though, that's something that really needs to come to your attention. A lot of times it sure seems that way, that's the best way of really about how to describe that. Is just that something that really that comes to your attention, and something that really you got to follow up with and all. But still, like everybody else will probably say too, that whenever it comes to understanding about, just to be able to know about, really about whenever it comes to understanding about really, if you are really are trying to get something done and trying to better understand something, it seems like to me that you just really had to take a responsibility and assign a task to where that, okay, this is according to the data that I found out, that this is what I found out, and this is what I would strongly suggest about this and that, and about those tasks and all that. So that's usually what I would think about it. But still, that if we're talking about something to be improved within maybe 5 months or so, within the next year or so, it sure seems that way to where that yeah, number one, if you're able to get something to work, especially. So let's just say that if you were trying something out, and let's just say that well, a couple of times that you tried it and it wasn't working. Well, I guess like everybody else will probably say that that's what you call a key fact. And I guess if you want to look at that to where the key facts, and I can go and write that on here for like in parentheses or quotations, key facts. What are key facts? Well, they're basically another study about key facts. Key facts, and they don't even really need to be in capital letters or some sort, but still, key facts. What are key facts? Those are basically a good highlight. I'm like, key facts. Yeah, key facts. It's another understanding about it's another way of how you want to call it, is toward like a conclusion, toward that the first time you tried it didn't work. Well, you try it after the second time, and then it'll wind up working after the second time. So the key facts are like the most important facts to remember. The key facts, for the most important. So it sure seems that way to where that when we think about key facts, though, that key facts are just another way of how do you want to call this, to where they try not to make it any more confusing than what it is. Try not to make it any harder than what it is. what's the key fact here? Yeah, the key fact is toward just to make sure that there is no confusion, and also, the better solving tips, and also, the key fact. I'm like, something that does not, in which I know for sure, like everybody else would probably say too, if you're going to write a key fact, that's something that does not contain any more than 14 characters, any more than 14 sentences long. Includes a bullet point, and also includes any sorts of sentence, like to where it's like a list, and like everybody else will probably say too, it's like an agenda, it's like a list, to where you go ahead and just write down a few shortened memos, and like say, the key fact of matter is to where it don't have to be so confusing. It's just easy facts to remember, and I can go ahead and include right here, key facts, and key facts. See here, put a period. Most important, but key facts, and so right here that I can go ahead and put on here is to where that knowing about results. Results period, and also the list can go on and on, but still I'll go ahead and highlight that right there. But still, results have been in right here on the bottom. I'll go ahead and put on here about maybe a conclusion, and I can we may have already heard that before about conclusion, but still. Conclusion, the results, and then also, if I can go ahead and get that right on there, but still, conclusion. Conclusion. So the key facts are just like another way, I don't know if you want to kind of call them syllables or anything like that, but just stuff that just to kind of make it less confusing and easy to remember. Just like just easy to remember notes. If you want to write down any notes or anything like that, easy to remember facts in a matter. And so it don't have to be really hard. It could just be something to where that you can just easily remember. And like everybody else will probably say too, that is it really better to go ahead and just write something down? Even though you might even say too that you may. If you think that copy and paste works a little bit better for you, like just to copy and paste something, or just to pre-write something, or proofwrite something, or anything that you want to add in quotes. But still, that when we think about the key factor about matter, about something, though, it's like, really that what we are basically are doing is we're generating ideas and come up with with a draft right here about the things that you were really the things that you were trying to just to get a better understanding about, really. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, toward it just to make something less confusing, that you go ahead and just write a draft about something, and before it's actually finished, and before the actual product, before that document is actually completed, right? And anything that you want to jot down in memory and all, but still that. So when we take down notes about anything, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that between coming up with the draft, and then also coming up with the documentation about if it was finished, or that no, that's the original compared to the rough draft and all that. So any pre-edited documents and all that stuff. So it's like, but still. But I just really think too that whenever we're going to be looking at any sorts of documentation, though, it sure seems that way. That really, just to kind of make the long story short, like everybody else will probably say too, that you go ahead and write down a few sentences about something, and you want to know too that what sorts of conclusion, what facts, and what what sorts of data have you been able to collect from the 5 hours that you've been working on this. And a lot of times it sure seems that way. Like everybody else will probably say too. Well, really, that number one, you probably had to download and install the right, to make sure everything was all up to date, and also to clarify everything, and also just to try to get the program to function correctly, and also any other source of data that you were checking out also. But let's just say though that one of the research would also be advised as to where that, yeah, if you have an idea that that's going to work for sure, that you tried it for sure, and if you haven't tried it for sure, then more likely, like everybody else will probably say too, that's whenever that you just want to go and just jot down the directions about, okay, do you think it's better to go and write down your ideas on a document on paper rather than just try to keep them all memorized? Or like everybody else will probably say too, do you think it's better to go and write them down and keep them for reference rather than just to say as to where, well, they're not going to work. I tried that before. It ain't going to work, or I doubt that that's going to happen, or that's not such a good idea. But still, really, that in order to be able to improve technology for the better, it sure seems that way to where, like everybody else will probably say too, that what do you think the president has to say about that? So far as is that, yeah, if you want to go ahead and write down something, if you want to think of an idea that that's more likely that's going to work though, do you think that maybe people are going to listen to your opinion about that? And then 102 is to word it, yeah, well, what have you found out about that? And like I say, yeah, Made in America, right? You want to tell people a story about Made in America. Well, really, though, that you want to talk about a story about is that yeah, a company that found something that you're familiar with very interesting, so they decide to ask you about that. And a lot of times it's like, well, really, I don't really have a college degree right now at the moment. So right now, but still, like everybody else would probably say too, that how do you know about your research though? How do you know whenever your work becomes interesting, to somebody else? And everybody say too that whenever you research about something, it's just to get a better understanding about what is it that you do. And so that's why it sure seems that way that, watching the president's speech right here, and the president's going to maybe say that, yeah, Madam Vice President and Speaker Pelosi, no president has said those words right here on the podium, and it's about time. But still, how many of us will probably say too that is it about time to where that, yeah, the moment that we really been waiting for, especially. But like everybody else would probably say too, well, if it's really about the promotion, or if it's really about the fact about yeah, America, it's really about doing our part, right? But still, that half the time you want to know too that is the president really telling all of us, yeah, something that you could be working on. But still, but whenever it comes to sharing our ideas and talking about, our talents and everything, half the time you want to know too is that really though, anything that you do in your organization and you want to know too, do you really have to wait until the right moment, just to be able to talk about something? Or if anything, the people may say that, well, really, people are going to maybe say if they're going to ask you politely, though, you'll be willing to talk about them, But anybody say, either way, thanks for sharing. And a lot of times it's like, just to better understand what is it that you do, But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.